We are here with Michael Feinstein. Michael, he's the founder and CEO of Burrow Coworking in the Miami area. We'll dive into that a little bit more. Michael, I was trying to think of the last time I've seen you in person. It's been so long.
I
Years
mean,
and years.
it
Yeah.
was one of the early Lexi meetings, I would assume.
Yeah.
Remember
I mean,
those? Like
hosted
2000.
you hosted one. That was when I met Nick Clark for the first time. And that was like 2013 or something like that. I mean, that was a really long time ago.
It's old
So
school.
I don't think it's been quite that long, but it's been a while.
I mean, it's possible. You haven't changed one bit, by the way. So if it has been that long, whatever you're doing,
It's the
keep
Zoom
doing it.
filter. Yeah. It's totally
I'm a lot whiter and wrinklier, and you're like 2013 Jamie. So
Well,
yeah.
she got rid of her spaces, Michael, and you keep getting spaces. So that's just throwing that out there, right?
Might
Just
be a
what I've seen.
correlation. Maybe. Yeah.
Geo, 100%. That's what's going on.
I know. So you've been doing this for a long time. Wait, first we have to talk about your son's playing. How old are your kids now? Because they were little back then. So 10, 12?
10 and 12. 10
Okay.
and 12. I have a 12-year-old girl who
Yeah.
is 12 going on 18. And I have a 10-year-old boy who plays soccer like, I don't know, like it feels like 10 times per week. Maybe it's only 5. And I have to drive him to all the games, but he loves it. And it's nice to get them off of Fortnite once in a while. So I don't mind that he's running around playing soccer.
Yeah. I also have a 12-year-old girl going on 18. It's living the dream every day. And Gio and I are both soccer players. I mean, not actively
Wow.
at the moment, but I do a lot with our local soccer league.
I played on Sunday. Don't love being not in the current.
We haven't talked about that. Okay, Gio's actively playing, which keeps his gray hair gray. That might be where his grays are coming from.
Well, let's rewind.
Yeah,
So you've cheated.
Yes, let's talk
because,
about Michael's story. Yes.
Yeah, you've cheated. You know Michael. No one else here knows Michael, or they know of Michael. Me personally, I thought Michael was a unicorn. There's a few of those out there. So I've never actually met Michael, but I've heard all about Michael and I've been in his spaces. So let's rewind with, you said he's been in the business forever. Michael, tell us about how you got in, how long, what's your background?
So I started Bureau. I guess we built out our space in 2010, our first space in Midtown, which at the time there was nothing there. Now Midtown is really a very dynamic, happening, live, work, eat, play neighborhood. But we were really early in Midtown. I think it was like us and 5 guys, and I don't even know if Target was open. And now there's like thousands of apartments, and it's a cool neighborhood. But we rented that space in 2010. It was brand new space, so first gen. And I don't know how I got, honestly, a landlord in 2010 to build out a co-working space for us on to fund that, but we did. Without a track record. I mean, I guess I came from hospitality. So if we take a step back, I did have a background in hospitality. Nothing to do with workspaces or office. I came from the world of luxury resorts. So I worked for a company that developed, it was actually a pretty amazing job. If I could turn back the clock, I wouldn't mind doing it a little more.
Maybe less gray hair.
2003 to 2009, I worked for a company called Exclusive Resorts, and they're still around, actually. Inspirato is a spinoff, and other companies you may have heard of. But essentially, the company leased and purchased and developed luxury properties around the world. And then it was a club membership model, almost like a very high-end timeshare. They obviously didn't use that word, but it was luxury resort club or destination club, and that's what the industry is still called. But it was basically, wealthy people sharing $3 to $5 million villas around the world, and I had the fun job of making the deals outside the U.S. So they would like send me to Tuscany to go like buy 10 villas or, go to southern Spain or Greece. And I wasn't like leasing a villa for the summer. I was like buying, I was the buyer. I would come in and say like, we need to buy 12 apartments in Paris, like this month, in the same
Wow.
building. So obviously I was like the guy when I would show up. It was a fun job. And I got to say, I did take advantage because I did try to convince the club we need to be in Seychelles. We need to be in, you know, I had a trip to Rwanda, a business trip to Rwanda, gorilla trekking, trying to convince them we need to buy lodges where the gorillas are.
Funny.
I did take the piss, as the English say, on these travel trips and go everywhere I've always wanted to go. And that was great. Honestly, that was, but like all great things, it came to an end, and I moved to Miami for my girlfriend at the time, now my wife of 4. So that was a good move. But I came to Miami post exclusive resorts, and I didn't know what I was going to do in Miami. I hadn't lived in the US in a while. I was living in Europe, London and Paris before that. And WeWork didn't exist. Regis did, but I'd only been to one, and it wasn't that impressive. I know since then they've gotten a little better at design, but the one or two I saw were, nothing. And so I said, maybe there's an opportunity to create cool shared workspaces. Actually, there was a little bit of inspiration from Jerome, Jamie, because Blank Spaces was open.
Yeah.
And his website was pretty good in 2009, 2010. I haven't looked at it in a while, but it was like, wow, that's a cool space. So I guess you could build like a cool 10 to 20,000 foot space, populate it with desks and some offices, and make money that way. And it was really just a very loose business plan, maybe a 3-page business plan. I raised some money, friends and family, which turns out was really the only money we ever needed. It was a very small round, honestly, and because the landlord built our first space. And that was an interesting meeting. It was the landlord who developed all of Midtown, the Carey family from New York, big developers. This was their Miami project. And I think we just got along really well. And he liked me and he believed in the vision. And he said, yeah, I'll build it. Whatever we agreed to, $60 a foot or something. Back in the day, you could build a space for that amount of money. And it looked cool. We got a good designer who had never done an office, only residential. That's what I wanted, and a hotel project they had done, but no office background. And, a friend of a friend architect, and we were off and running. And that was, 15 years ago. And I guess one of the funniest parts of that was I remember like a month before opening, our first space was 10,000, but we grew that space to 20,000 feet a few years later. I don't know, Gio, when you were there, if you saw all 3 floors or just 1 floor, but it was kind of cool. It's like a rotunda space. It's round glass, almost looks like a spaceship from the outside. Jamie might have seen it on the Lexi trip, but
I did see all 3.
Yeah. You saw all 3.
You did see all 3 floors.
Yeah.
Okay. So that at the time it was only 2 floors when we opened, but right before we opened, I remember a very like experienced real estate person saying to me, how pre-leased are you? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he's like, no, like out of the 10,000 feet, how pre-leased? And I was like, 0%. I mean, I didn't even know you could pre-lease space. Like, so many of us got into this business, Jamie, you too, like in 2010, 11.
Just
and
making it all up. No. Yeah.
I was like pre-lease, like I don't even know where I'm getting my furniture from, and we're opening like in 2 weeks. So anyways, yeah, you just figure it out. What we did well from the start, and that first deal being a good example, is pick good locations, like 2 to 3 years ahead of them being like great, fun, cool neighborhoods. We were always in all 8 locations, including the Hollywood one you saw. We were 2 to 3 years ahead of like the pack, and certainly in Midtown. And and we've always had good landlord relationships. I think my key lesson 15 years ago was to do deals with people you like. Whatever the lease says, no one looks at it anyways over time. Like you sign it, it's like 100 something pages and you never look at it. And so you deal with problems as they arise, usually person to person. But I know like if you're WeWork, you're dealing with, REITs and funds. So it's not person to person, but we deal with like landlord, like I deal with owners. Like that's always been my policy. Like I need to know who owns the space and who do I call when there's an issue, because there's always going to be issues.
Mhm.
And even if you're not speaking to the guy directly, you're not speaking to like Goldman Sachs. You know what I mean? So that was a good lesson, to pick landlords you like and to pick locations a little bit ahead of the curve. And those two lessons stuck with me. I would even say the landlord thing is the most important, in my view, in the industry, to do deals, leases or management agreements with people you find to be reasonable and like-minded and accessible. I mean, certainly during COVID, that was the whole story, but even outside of COVID, like you got to do deals with people you like. That's my first rule of thumb. I think I'm rambling. You asked about my background and I ended up.
No, although I'm still like trying to imagine the moment when you were like, let's do shared office space. Like it really didn't much exist. Like you sort of seen a Regis, you somehow found Jerome in blank spaces. Then you're like, I'm doing it.
Well, you know what, Jamie? I think so. I moved to Miami from London. I didn't mention that point. When I was traveling around
Yeah.
doing deals for Susan Sorts, I was London based. And London had a ton of cool office space.
Yeah.
Like pretty much every meeting I had with anyone was in a cool space. And then I had worked in the US before living in London. I lived in London for 7 years and Paris before that. And also Paris has great office space. And my experience in the US was office space was like terrible. Like literally, like everywhere you went was like bad lighting, like gray cubicles or grayish, like
So
grayish
bad.
beige.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was almost like, well, like, are they doing this on purpose? Like, is it just they want like employees to suffer? Or maybe, I don't know what it was, but there was such a difference between European office space and
Yeah.
American office space. I understand that in 2010, there were, tech companies that had cool offices,
Yeah.
fine. Outside of Silicon Valley, if you just went to like a lawyer's office in Boston or whatever, an accountant in Chicago, the office was not going to be a cool office. But it was in Europe. And so I came to Miami and I was like, well, like, why isn't there more cool office space? Like, because I loved working in cool office spaces in Europe. And I bet people would pay for that. And that's all it was. It was, so the aha moment, Jamie, was based on my experience in being in beautifully designed, nicely lit offices in Europe.
Okay. That
And
makes
that's why
much more sense.
We even took a European name, right? Euro is, I thought it was Scandinavian. It's actually German, it turns out. But I just wanted something Euro sounding because that was the inspiration.
Yeah. I mean, even today, I was in London and over Thanksgiving, and I was like, oh, huh. They're really advanced around what they're doing even today. I mean, the US has caught up a lot, but they're for sure on the forefront. Okay, Gio, I'm sure you have questions. Dive in.
No, I've got plenty of questions, but one of them was you covered it just now because I figured your time internationally was really what led to you stepping out and doing what you did. So why Miami? Your wife?
Yeah, my girlfriend. So we were in a long distance relationship, London, Miami. That's a horrible long distance flight, to carry, over a year. But we managed like a year of that. And then it was like, all right, you're moving to London or I'm moving to Miami. And she's like, okay, I'll move to London. I was like, well, I kind of want to move to Miami. So I was ready. I was ready to come back to North America. I grew up in Canada, and which obviously is different. I grew up, Montreal is very different than Miami, but I grew up coming to Miami regularly with my family there's a big connection between Montreal and Miami.
Hmm.
Weirdly, like Montrealers, I guess it's a weather thing, but most Montrealers like vacation in Miami.
Hmm.
I don't know if the I don't know if the vice versa is true, but I grew up coming to Miami, and so it was I knew the city. I had cousins here. It wasn't like I was starting, and then she had a big network of friends and family. So it was a like easy landing spot from London. I just didn't know what I would be doing, but I knew like I could figure it out, and I wanted to leverage my hospitality background. I think I did in a sense that even though like building and buying luxury villas is different than operating office space, there's a little bit of overlap in the sense that like when you're designing a villa, you're thinking about the experience, especially the high-end villa, like high-end Americans, how they travel. You're thinking about everything, like the remote controls for the TVs and who's carrying the luggage from this point to that point. And you have to really think about the whole experience, right? It's not just building a nice villa. And so like when I got into this business, it was like, all right, well, like this is like, what's the experience? Like they're going to come to, like a lot of people can get an architect and design a nice office, but like they're going to get here, and what do we want it to be? Like how personalized is the service? How good is the coffee? Is there beer? Is there not beer? Like what is, so I was used to thinking those things through, which helped. I mean, it's not rocket science, and a lot of people without my background figured it out. I think it helped that I came from the world of luxury hospitality. There was a little bit of crossover.
Well, I'm still stuck. I'm going to go back to it. So love makes us do crazy things, right? So here you are overseas, long-term relationship, long distance relationship. What is it why her? What did you love about her that made you carry out through that? And I mean, at this point, y'all have built an entire life together.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, she's a Guatemalan Jewish girl, which was like, that's a unicorn. Talk about a unicorn. So I was like, okay, well, Jewish ticks a big box because I'm Jewish, but like you kind of, you know, nothing wrong with Long Island Jews, but Guatemalan is like, that's exotic. So she was beautiful and Spanish speaking. And I said she is beautiful and she is Spanish speaking. And we connected. We met on holiday and we connected. And the relationship, I was in my 30s. It was, you don't mess around so I said, we got to give this a chance. We got to be in the same city. And she was in her late 20s. And a year later we were married, and a year after that we had a child. And so it went pretty quickly, and it all went in the right direction, thankfully. So our kids have a Canadian. Our kids are gringos because they live in Miami. Like they're born in Miami with a real Canadian father and a real Guatemalan mother, and it's a nice mix in the house. There's a little French, a little Spanish, a lot of English, and a lot of chaos.
No, so are y'all, I mean, we're in the middle of, I guess Passover started last night obviously when this comes out, it'll be over. So y'all actively in the faith, and did y'all do a big Passover celebration?
25 people over last night, 6 take glasses of wine. If I'm a step slower than usual, Jamie, it was a big Passover Seder, and it went late. And yeah, it was grandparents and kids and the whole shebang.
That's
I
awesome.
guess I do Christmas dinners. Or lunches. It was that kind of a thing, and very traditional. And it was nice. I'm a little tired, but it was nice.
Worth it.
Well,
Totally.
thanks for joining us, even though you're a bit tired. And I mean, it's a holy time for sure. So your design. So obviously I'm not unfortunately in your space, but beautiful design behind me. I've looked at some of the spaces. How has your design evolved from everything from your floor plan to your finishes and everything else over the 15 years?
It's definitely been an evolution. I mean, I think there is something consistent. Every bureau will have, let's say, concrete floors, white walls, high ceilings, and good natural light. So there is a little bit of like, okay, I'm in bureau. But from a design standpoint, I think the first two we did on a budget, really, like, the landlord built out the whole, like, soup to nuts, and we agreed on a dollar amount per foot. And we did the best we could from a design standpoint with a budget at the 2011 and 12, we built our first spaces, or 2010 and 12. So, it was around $60. I think so. The first evolution is now we spend more than double that, obviously. We didn't have, you're looking at some expensive tile behind you on that picture, Geo, with millwork. And that, I think, it's not, it looks like walnut. Yeah. So, when you start getting into like walnut wrapped walls with like, those Moroccan tile blue, that stuff gets expensive. And I think by our third or fourth bureau, we were like getting into those level of finishes. So I would say each bureau got a little bit more high end as we progressed.
That driven
Now
by your preference, member preference, where you thought like your brand positioning should be? Like what was sort of the
Jamie, I think it's just me. I think like you always want the next one just to be like a little cooler than the last one. Like
Yeah.
I think that's if you're a restaurateur, a hotelier, or I even in this business, like why would your eighth location not be sexier than your third location? Like that would be weird. But I will say that's the way I view it. But if you ask members, there's members who might say our first location is their favorite, or our third. I'm sitting in our third right now, which won a design award. It's Mimo Coppertone building, a famous building in Miami. And it's filled with this like mid-century stuff, fun wall pages and vintage photography. And some people will say like they love this 1960s Mad Men vibe, and others will like a more modern. So I don't necessarily think that it's like a sequential order from like, basic design to best design. I think people have their favorites. I just think we try to make each one a little sexier, whatever that means, a little more current, I guess. And we've used 2 or 3 different architects, 2 or 3 different designers, but we don't change the whole team up. So we haven't, it's generally like it's the same GC and one of our two designers or 2 or 3 architects. So there is some consistency, which helps. So that's from a design standpoint, the evolution. I think in a nutshell, we just have more finishes over time versus just, having the nice bones, which is high ceilings, concrete floors, big
great
windows.
light? Yeah.
Yeah. So from a layout standpoint, you asked, that was a very good question. We have also evolved quite a bit. Our first location, which you referenced, Midtown, was probably 50% office, like closed rooms, and 50% open desk. And that open desk might have been, not might have been, it is a mix of dedicated and flex unassigned desks. And so that location definitely has a higher percentage of open space versus any of our other locations. And that percentage went down with each location. So maybe it was 50-50. And then maybe our next one was like 60-40 closed open, and then maybe 70-30. And our last one was it's all offices. We don't do both our 7th and 8th locations are all offices. There is flex seating areas. So if you're a flex member, you can still pop into any bureau and have somewhere to sit. But the dedicated desk product has dwindled over time. Where it exists, it's still a good seller. It's not like we have empty desks in our first 4 or 5 bureaus. It's just that over time, we felt like the demand and the longevity of the membership was pushing us towards office only, which is ironic, Jamie, because back in the day when you and I and Benjamin and Bill and, the crew were talking about this business, there was a really strong view that it has to be mostly open space, that if it's not mostly open space,
That's not
that,
co-working. I know.
right.
Right.
So
Yes.
do you remember
Until real life and P&L started to change people's perspective.
Until
well,
Giovanni showed up and blew it all up.
no, Gio, in one of these early like 2000 conferences that Jamie and I were at, like meetings, not conferences, meetings.
Yeah.
Like I was an outlier. Like I was like, no, we have half closed offices, and I think we'll do more next. And they looked at me like, you don't get it, dude. That's not co-working. Like whatever you're doing with your doors. And I was like, no, it's still like co-working. It's just I think people want more privacy rather, or some people don't mind, but a lot of people want more privacy, and it's not a bad thing. Like I don't think we have to be fundamentalist about this. But people were, and there was in those days there was a lot of only open space co-working. I don't think any of those places survived to today. Maybe there's different versions of that in like kind of Soho housey vibe, but not the way they existed in 2010, like 100 desks in an open room. That didn't last, right, Jamie?
That did not last. That is right. I can still remember, not to pick on Benjamin, but Benjamin, I think, just got really lucky opening all open space in Manhattan. And then he did a space in Chicago. And I can remember him calling me and being like, hey, where are the people?
Right.
Like, where's everyone? Why are they not just rolling in and I'm checking in full? I remember him talking at the Lexi meetings, like these first world problems. Like, what do you do when you check in full? Like your open seats are full because you're the only co-working space in, some neighborhood in Manhattan. I mean, and I'd be like, Benjamin, how are you marketing? And he'd be like, social media,
Right.
like those were the days.
I gotta say, I have a real soft spot for grind. I love even the Chicago space. When I think about some of the best design spaces I've seen in the industry, grind definitely,
Yeah.
even though it was way too much open space and it was never going to work economically, Benjamin had great taste and his design team was great.
Taste. Yeah. The furniture, I can't remember what furniture line he was buying. I was like, yes, beach rest. I was like, what are you doing, Benjamin? Yes. Oh, he did have great taste.
They were, yeah. I loved grind spaces, honestly.
Yeah.
It's a shame it went away, but
yeah. And even Work Bar, I think Work Bar is a little bit of an anomaly in the industry, in that I think they're still roughly 50-50, but I think they do really well with like the enterprise client. They just, and especially with Sarah Travers as their CEO, like they have that sales mentality for that audience, and they've done some unique design solutions. But yes, those were the days. Okay, we have to let you go in a second here. I'm curious about your real estate structure.
No,
so
Jamie,
yeah,
Jamie, I texted my wife because we started late, so we're good.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Tell her thank
Love you, wife.
I know, exactly. Okay, well, anyway, I'm curious about your real estate structure. So you leased the first space, but I think you do you own one of the assets? Yeah, tell us how your real estate structure has varied or evolved over time.
Bureau 1 and 2 straight lease. Bureau 3, we called landlord from the second bureau and said, do you want to buy this building with us? And he said, sure. So bureau number 3, we co-own the building with landlord 2 to this day. And so we set up a propco to do that. So we don't own the building outright. We own it with a partner, but our propco is the partner and then leases to our opco.
Okay.
And then bureau 4 and 5 were straight leases. Bureau 6, we bought the building with a different partner. So 2 bureaus we own with partners and lease back to opco. And then bureau 7 and 8 are management deals. So like real management deals. The term management deal.
I know, Gio. Yes, tell us what this means for you. Gio has the same issue with the term.
Okay. I literally wrote a management agreement from scratch because I didn't know where to get one in from the industry. I started with a hotel one, And that was like 100 pages, and I whittled it down to maybe 30, but I wrote our management agreement based on a hotel. And it's a real management agreement. Like, the operator doesn't put $1 into anything. We get fees, guaranteed fees. And if we outperform from an NOI perspective, we get additional fees. That's the way hotels work. And that's the way our deals work. But when I speak to other people who claim to have management deals, they're like, yeah, well, we have to put this into CapEx, and then there's a waterfall in terms of like when we collect rent. And so we could lose money. I was like, you can lose money on a management deal. Well, I want to just do a lease. Like, I don't even understand what you're talking like. And I think, not to, single out Industrious, but I think they do these deals with guaranteed floors and CapEx contributions. And at the end of the day, like, it's not really a management deal. Like, it might be like
Creative
somewhere between,
partnership.
creative
Yeah.
lease. Yeah, or maybe a rev share or whatever. But if you're taking on risk, it's not a management deal. It's something else. And maybe there needs to be a new word, like, whatever, something between a
Basically,
lease
participation lease, right? Is the landlord's participating on it. And it's big in the retail world, right? And that's what a lot of people don't understand is a lot of restaurants have a floor with a percentage rent above it. And so they're more retail deals than they are office.
Absolutely. And that's a great model. If you can't get a management deal done, then do that. Do a percentage rent deal. I would do that rather than a straight lease. But our management deals are like, we don't have any risk, and we don't put up any money or any guarantees or any floors, or they just fire us if we underperform after X number of years, like the way hotels work. So that's our model right now. Obviously, out of the three, my preference is owning the building. And if I could turn back the clock 15 years, that's the only thing we would do, is buy buildings and have a opco structure. I assume everybody in the industry would say that. At least we've done it a couple times. It's capital intensive. It's hard work. It's a whole different animal. But honestly, like, you make much more money on the propco than the opco. So everyone knows that in every industry. So I don't know why more people in our industry don't own their buildings.
Don't do that. Yep. You're Gio, do you know anybody else with this mix of real estate structures? First, you're a unicorn because you're doing straight management deals. It drives Gio nuts. People say they are, but they're not really, and they're really hard to get. And I think that may be a testament to your longevity, your ability to produce, your track record. It's not that easy to do. And Industrious,
I'll
of
tell
course.
you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Well,
I think another.
So Industrious has the means, right? They have capital in order to do these sort of hybrid approaches. So that's what they do. But most operators don't. And so they don't. So yeah, Gio, jump in.
I think another part, as you touched on it, Michael, is, and obviously you don't need to give us the names or anything like that, but my guess is Miami, or really South Florida, is such a unique market because you have a lot of foreign investors, right? That are able to think outside the box, that are able to be more entrepreneurial than institutional landlords in a lot of places. So is that kind of what your success rate has been, is people that have other, I guess, backgrounds and mindsets than the typical American mindset?
100%.
Real estate.
I mean, I think it's a great point, and I think you hit the nail on the head. Our first management deal was with a French owner with no loan on his building, and it's a beautiful building, and an entrepreneurial guy in his 70s who could do whatever he wants. And we had one meeting, and he liked me, and he said, send me he wanted me to do a lease. I said, no. He said, okay, send me the management agreement. And like a couple days later, we had a signed management agreement. It was like just a guy who didn't answer to anyone. He didn't have lenders. He didn't have, he's French. So actually our meetings were in French, which I hadn't spoken in a long time, but that was our first one. And then when you have one under your belt and you have real numbers, and then the second one's a lot easier, right? Because you can say, well, talk to the first guy. Or here's the numbers. If you don't believe the numbers, talk to the first guy. So the second one's easier. And then the third one's easier because you have now two that they can, two people they can talk to. The second pure management deal was with a bureau member. So there was a relationship there. He knew the product, and I assume he didn't have financing on the building. I didn't ask. I don't think you can do the kind of deals I present if you have a lender because there's no guarantees. And in both cases, we took most of the building. Half the building in both cases, but most of the parking. So it was, the lender's not going to approve that deal. That's why Industrious and others do floors, because lenders make them do floors, I assume, rent floors. So this, but these are a bit needle in a haystack. You're right. In Miami, it's easier to find the French guy who owns a building with no lender than in Cincinnati. But even in Miami, it's not like I can do a dozen of these a year. Like if I do one management deal every 2 years with someone like that, that's fine for me. And that's how we'll continue to expand.
So kiddos, right? We talked about that kind of before we started recording. You've got two little ones, you said?
I do. A 10-year. Oh yeah, we weren't recording. I have a 10-year-old boy and a 12-year-old girl. So busy on the home front, but it's a nice time, nice age. Like every parent, the challenge with a 10 and 12-year-old is just making them like run around and ride their bike and get dirty instead of being on their iPads. They don't have phones, so that's a win.
Nice work.
Holding out on the phones. It's a constant battle with the 12-year-old. iPad, they have some daily allotted time, but we're pretty strict. But they're great kids. They're athletic. They're well-traveled and interesting kids, and we're blessed. We're blessed to have,
So if each of your kids was able to give you two things that they love about you, what would they be?
Oh, wow. Two things they love about dad. I think they would consider me like the less strict one. They would both say that. So the first thing they would say is dad is less strict than mom. And they love that.
So dad's the pushover.
Yeah. They both like my barbecue. Like my wife does 95% of the cooking, but I do the grilling. So I think if dad's grilling, they're happy. That means they're going to get a good piece of meat or something. And I think they would say they like that I'm sporty because I play sports with both of them. We kind of have this king of the court going on. We have a basketball hoop in the backyard. So it's become very competitive. The three of us, king of the court, you score, you stay on, you know how it works. Yeah. So, that's part of our routine. And my daughter's getting into lacrosse. I've been, practicing with her. So I'd say that strict, I'd say less strict, more sporty. Yeah, I don't know if they'd mention the food. I may be giving myself too much credit for my steaks. But.
So do they appreciate the fact that you're an entrepreneur?
I don't know. That's such a tough question because they have no frame of reference outside of an entrepreneurial dad. So I think they like that, like people know bureau. They like that there's like bureau signs all over Miami. That's cool. They're like, oh, that's like our family's business. And a lot of people that they meet know bureau, and their friends' parents work at bureau or have worked at bureau. So I think there's a little bit of like, a pride factor for them, but I don't think they really understand like that I'm an entrepreneur and that's different than someone who has a job.
Yeah.
They're a little young for that.
It's strange to have kids at this age where they just don't, right. They don't have another frame of reference yet. And so they don't necessarily appreciate things or understand the difference until someday. Okay, I have a couple of questions. One, since it's sort of related to my entrepreneurial question, what's the secret to the longevity? You've been doing this for a long time. What keeps you like getting up every morning and still wanting to be in this business?
Well, a couple things. I like I like my team a lot. Like I have a great team. One of the challenges of the business and the hardest part probably is like retaining people for more than 3, 4, 5 years. Cause there's really at Bureau, we don't have like many corporate jobs. It's like me and an HR person. We used to have like a COO, but not even so. So it's really like a community manager and a membership director. But I really, you know, even though it's not, you know, a multi-layered career path, we've been able to retain people, and I've built great relationships with a lot of my team members. Some are new, obviously. There's some turnover each year, but some have been with us 4, 5, 6, 7 years, and so there's a bit of a family vibe to our company. So I think that's the first thing is my loyalty to the team and vice versa. It's a good business. It's been a good business financially for us, for our family. So, you don't rush to leave a business that is, a healthy cash flowing business. Obviously it's a grind. Only operators truly understand the grind because at the end of the day, as you know, Jamie, you're hosting people from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. or whatever, 8 to 6. In our case, 1,500 people a day. There's always a few that are going to be grumpy, and you got to figure out, how to resolve their internet or air conditioning or whatever. And like running hotels or restaurants, it's a grind, and you got to lean on your team because, certainly Bureau 1 and 2, I got way more into the day to day. By 4, 5, 6, 7, you have to remove yourself from like that guy's complaining about the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
You can't, you can't
But then you have to
live in
love
this
on your
industry.
team for being the ones who put up with the guy who's not happy about the temperature.
Yeah, and it's always the guy paying $249 a month, not $22.49 a month, who's not happy about something. But anyway, that's a different conversation. I like my team, I like my members, I like my spaces, I like our neighborhoods. So, that's the key to the longevity is that I still like what I do. That's the simplest answer. I think there will be a time where, I'm ready to for the next chapter. And, there'll be, I imagine, a buyer for our business. But in the meantime, it's a good, healthy, inspiring place for me to continue working.
Wait, Gio, I have to ask one more follow-up question. So team, you said you don't have a COO. I think one of the biggest challenges in this industry is that like scaling from a couple of locations to like at some point you need some like executive team or support beyond the individual locations. Can you just talk about kind of how you've managed that, maybe a little more what the team looks like and how you made that transition without, it sounds like you funded it through, you know, operating cash flow, which is impressive.
Yeah. So in terms of our growth, it was funded mainly through cash flow. We have taken on loans over the years, nothing significant. I think the only loan we still have outstanding is like the 3% COVID loan that they were giving out, the EIDL ones. So that's a great loan. But we took like short-term money from banks and from American Express and from others who were offering it when we needed, but mostly cash flow. In terms of the corporate structure, for me, like when I speak to operators who are similar size, and there's a bunch now, like there's more than a handful of operators that have, let's say, 5 to 10 locations. And I'm always taken aback by how much corporate overhead they have. Like, I don't get it when like I won't mention names of companies, but who the 3 or 5 companies my size are, and they have like a CMO and a CTO and a CFO. And I'm like, well, that's all your profit right there. Like, you got to figure out how to run this business without a CTO and a CMO. Like, so we've just figured out how to run the business without those 4 or 5 C-level people. Now I do have a full-time HR because even with, we're not a big company, about 20 people, that's still like you need someone managing that end of the business. I believe that is the most important. But like marketing, you could outsource to an agency, which we've always done. Finance, you can do the same. Technology, I mean, I don't know why people have CTOs, and I mean, there's not that much tech once you set up the space. So I think people overthink the tech side of this business. So we've managed to stay lean. And I think the mistake local operators make is doing that, bringing on that corporate layer too early. Obviously, if I wanted to go from 8 bureaus to 50 bureaus, I need 10 C-level people or 5. But if we're growing at 1 bureau a year, which is kind of what we do, and some years we don't grow, then, I think those 6-figure salaries, you got to be careful. That eats into your cash flow big time.
Yep. Okay, Gio.
No, I mean, you did. And you want to ask a personal question? You always do so good with those.
Me? No.
Yeah.
No,
You've gotten better.
Wait, we only
but
have
what,
2 minutes, though.
yeah, I know.
Make it good.
What,
Okay.
what are you passionate about? Right? What gets you up every day other than your family?
Well, I mean, that is what I'm most passionate about. So,
That's why I took it away.
Other than what do they say? How is the film Miss Lincoln? Was that, other than the incident? So no, other than my family, I mean, that's really the focus of my passion. I play sports. I play tennis. I'm passionate about my kids' sports. Like I go to all their games, even most of their practices. When we have a chance to travel, which is really now in the summers, because our kids go to summer camp, so sleep away, which is great. So my wife and I get like a 3 to 4 week honeymoon period, and we've been traveling. So I mean, who isn't passionate about traveling to Italy or France or somewhere cool like that in the summer? But that's it. Pretty simple, straightforward. Family, sports, travel. Keep it simple. That's what I try to do, Gio.
Well, I think the beauty of what you've been blessed to do is you've had so much exposure to so many different cultures, right? And so a lot of people don't get that, right? And so as I've looked at a few of your spaces and I've interacted or heard of you from people, that's a big part of it is your layouts and just your overall culture is multicultural, right? And that's really what South Florida is there's so much of that international vibe, right? And so I think that's the real cool part that you get to bring into your spaces. All right,
Definitely.
Jamie, your last question.
My last question. Okay. Well, my last typical question is, what's your karaoke song?
Something by Bruce Springsteen, probably Thunder Road, maybe Born to Run. I mean, I could probably do any Springsteen song. That would be my go-to. I'm a terrible singer. So like, even though I know all the words, it wouldn't be enjoyable to listen
For the
to
audience.
me sing. Yeah, I would. My go-to karaoke is to sit in the back and not participate. But if I'm forced to, then I'll probably go with, I mean, either something ridiculous just to be funny, like maybe like Alanis Morissette or something. But if I'm trying to like do something and sound good, I'll take a stab at one of Bruce's songs.
Okay. Very nice.
And
Okay.
your doppelganger is Richard Gere, by the way.
Ooh.
Get that.
Yeah, you must get that a ton. I didn't even think of that until you said it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Okay, thank you for doing this. I can't remember why we said we wanted to talk to Michael, but we mentioned him on the podcast, and you sent me an email and he said,
I've been waiting to get Michael on for like a year.
I know.
Yeah. Kurt's like, Kurt kept asking.
I like these podcasts a lot. You guys do a great job. I learned from your podcast, and it's actually my way of like keeping up with the industry, to be honest. I watch a lot of them, and in one of them, Jamie out of nowhere is like, "Yeah, we got to speak to Michael." I right away.
You did totally. I was like, "This is brilliant. We should manifest more guests that we want to talk to." And just emailed me. Sure, I'll do it. Yeah.
And, sometimes I reach out to people from your show. Like I became friendly with Flip because I saw him on your show.
Oh, Flip's a great
Uh,
contact for you. You and Flip. Yeah, I love that. I love Flip.
yeah, we're we're in touch, and I think you guys do a good job. Really, this is I don't watch many podcasts or listen to. I don't. My wife does, and I'd like to. I just don't find the time. But I do make it a priority to listen to your podcast,
Awesome.
to watch it actually. not
Oh,
listen to it.
wow. Okay, good to know. Somebody's actually watching us. So he knew the background was coming, probably. Awesome. Okay. Well, Michael, it was great to catch up, however long it's been. Let's not make it as long next time.
You're always welcome in Miami, guys.
Oh, yeah. Good
Well,
point.
we really appreciate it. Thank you for everything. And we'll talk to you soon. Get to soccer practice.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right,
Take
take
care.
care.